Hello and welcome to How is Gatland Picking His Lions Teams. I've seen a whole bunch of teams being suggested for the various games, and I think people are a million miles out because they don't understand what the purpose of each game kind of is. And sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. Thank you very much for joining me. Always up for good rugby chats. Please feel free to put comments below. And you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can always put a thumbs up at any point during the video, so please do. So, as I say, I've seen lots of predicted teams for each of the games, and I think a lot of people are way out because they don't understand what Gatland or what they're trying to achieve with each game. We have to remember that this tour, or the 10 games, all come down to 3 games. It's those 3 tests. Everyone will remember how many of those games were won by each side, and the other games only really come into importance after that. So if the Lions lose 3-0 and they lost all the other games, then it would be a total whitewash, and that would be mentioned. But if the Lions win 3-0 and they lose all the other games, it'll be considered a Lions victory, and it doesn't matter what happened in those other games. So those other games do not stand in isolation, is what I'm trying to kind of say. And let's have a look at how the tour progresses and how Gatland has been picking, or will be picking, the players for each team. So we started off up north and in Whangarei with the New Zealand provincial Barbarians hosting the Lions. And that was only a couple of days after they landed here. A lot of the players had been playing in Europe the weekend before. And so Gatland's choice there clearly was to choose players who were not playing the week before, and a couple of players who he also left out a couple of players who he thought he had nailed on as test starters anyway, or players he knew. So, for example, George North, Jonathan Davis, didn't play in that game. Well, George North didn't really. So that's because Jonathan Davis was obviously within the final with the Scarlets the previous weekend. So what we saw there was many players who had basically missed out on European finals were played that game. We then moved on to the Blues, and Gatland had said ahead of time that he was going to give every player a start in the first 3 games. And it has to be 3 because he's got 3 fly halves, 3 scrum halves, so he can't play everyone in 2 games, or can't start everyone in 2 games. And so we saw a lot of players start the Blues game, who again and it was a midweek game, and it was more of a who was playing in finals, but also who are the possibles rather than the probables. Let's give them an opportunity to show themselves in this game. And so we already were starting to see a possibles versus probables, or dirt trackers versus test team, but around the constraints of who had been playing in the finals or who hadn't played already. Come the Crusaders, and we saw players like George North, Jonathan Davis get their first run-outs, because obviously Gatland knows those players. He doesn't have to learn about them in the first 2 games, and so he can hold them back for there. We also saw a lot of other players there who were thinking will be in the test lineup. Now, every well-laid plan comes unstuck with the first contact with the enemy, as they say, and injuries are that enemy that have got in the way. So Sam Warburton, for example, didn't start in this game because of injury. Jared Payne missed out in the first game because of injury or carrying niggles, and so they couldn't play in those games. We come round to the Highlanders, and again, it's a midweek game, and this is where we first see where it's purely down to, well, a lot of people saying it's purely down to the dirt trackers or the possibles rather than the probables. Again, there are a few things, a few flies in the ointment. Sam Warburton's coming back from injury, so he gets a run out there, and CJ Stander gets forced to start because of Moriarty carrying an injury. And this is where I think Gatland has got a couple of his selections wrong for this tour. And it's not around individual players, it's around balance of the squad. From memory, well, actually, don't need to do memory, I've got it here written down. But for the centres, we had Jonathan Davis, Henshaw, Joseph, Jared Payne, Teo, and Elliot Daly. So we had 6 players who could play in the centres. And then we had North, Nell, Seymour, Watson, Halfpenny, Hogg and Liam Williams. A further 7 who could play outside centre. Sorry, play in the outside backs. With Daly playing in the outside backs, it shows that he had too many centres. And it took us up to 8 outside backs. And as you only need 4 in a game, and one of those is only 3.5 in a game because the subs bench is shared with the centres, you really don't need 8 outside backs. And as we've seen with the injury to Hogg, and he's not been replaced, that I think we were overweight in that area. The other area that I think we have a problem with is around the loose forwards. With Billy Vanapola being injured and being replaced by Haskell, it's not a like-for-like player. And what I mean by that is we've lost an 8, an out-and-out 8, and replaced him with a 6-7, with a flanker, basically. That has led to the situation where CJ Stander, who a lot of us had thinking of being a Test 6, is having to play at 8 to cover that gap when Moriarty is injured. And so I think Haskell was the wrong replacement for Billy Vanapola, not because of his ability or his skills, but the position he plays in. And I think we could have done with another 8 on tour to allow CJ Stander to start on the bench against the Highlanders rather than starting actually in the first 15. Maybe Gatland would have put him in the first 15 anyway. But I say I think there are slight balance issues around the squad. I don't think it's been quite perfect. Coming up to the Maori All Blacks game at this coming Saturday, and that will mark the halfway point of the tour. There'll be 5 games in of the 10 game tour. Get my tongue around it, and we're only 1 week away from the first Test match. So we're going to see effectively the Test team, or the probable Test team, will get rolled out against the Maori All Blacks. Where Gatland has any doubts, he may give someone a last chance here to show their worth, perhaps from the bench rather than in the starting 15. But effectively, we're going to be seeing this as, in the way it's being billed in New Zealand, the whole way through as this is the 4th Test, and so yes, we will see the Test side being picked there. We then moved from Rotorua over to Hamilton, and where the Chiefs lay in wait, and this is where we get to the proper midweek team, where we're moving from possibles to unlikelies, and with the only exception being players who have, say, a bit like Rhys Webb, who will probably be a Test bench. He got to start against the Highlanders, so to make sure that he had game time. There may be a few players who don't get off the bench against the Maori All Blacks, or who are carrying an injury, that need a bit of game time to get themselves back up to speed. But otherwise, that Chiefs fixture will be very much the midweek side, or the second choice players. We roll into the Test matches then. First off at Eden Park. We then head down. We're going to have the Test team. We then head down to Wellington, where we have the midweek game against Hurricanes. And this is really about keeping the reserves fit more than anything else. So this is giving game time to players who may need to step up if one of the Test players gets injured. And that's all that game is really about. We then stay in Wellington for the Test match and then come up here for the Test matches. But the selection across those opening 6 games, I've seen a lot of people selecting players who are not going to be Test players for the Maori All Blacks this weekend, saying, oh, we're going to protect somebody. No, a week out, you're not protecting somebody from a Test match. You're playing your Test side, you're getting your final combinations together, and that will be a full Test team. The Chiefs game is where we start to protect players for the Test match. And the Crusaders Highlanders one has been about getting people into the right routine, fitness-wise and recovery-wise, for the Test matches. And that's how I believe he has structured this. As I say, there's the odd fly in the ointment around injuries, which will alter things. But apart from that, that's how he's basically been picking the tests, been picking the sides, I believe. All right, let me know your thoughts down below. I just remembered I forgot to put the link for my newsletter above, but hey, please do sign up for that if you're on YouTube. The link is down below. Share this with your friends if you want to explain to them how Gatland's gone about all this. Give it the old thumbs up on YouTube as well. That always helps. Thank you very much for joining me. I will be back tomorrow with my Maori All Blacks versus Lions preview once the squads have been announced, and I will be obviously on live YouTube live after the game on Saturday as well. So look out for that for the half-hour show straight after the game, giving you our reaction. Thanks for joining us. Bye.